I'm Arya Schwartz, and welcome to the Winsidr Show, where it's all about the W. The wins and losses are stacking up, so it's time for WNBA Stocks with me and Owen Pence. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to see our amazing staff's written content over at winsidr.com. That's winsidr.com. If you're looking to get tickets for the current WNBA season, thanks to our sponsors TickPick, you don't have to worry. The original no-fee ticketing site and official ticketing partner of the WNBA champion Chicago Sky. Use the link tickpick.com/Winsidr. That's tickpick.com/Winsidr for all your upcoming ticket purchases for the WNBA, NFL, NBA, or any other event. We're back at it with WNBA Stocks Update. Today, May 16th, I'm Arya Schwartz along with Owen Pence, and let's hop right into it. Owen, maybe a little reaction. I mean, I don't know. Do you want to talk about what's changed over the past weeks? Do you want to talk about the stocks of, well, the beauty of this segment and having the ability to change so rapidly as these teams do?
Yeah, 100%. I think this was the fun of it when I was kind of brainstorming this idea is that it's going to fluctuate so much on a week to week basis that already, this week we might be talking about teams. In fact, there is one team specifically that was on the downswing last week that now we've got with their stock already having risen. And I think this is especially so given that we have so little data right now. This is now our second episode. Connecticut still only played two games. Indiana's played 5 games. Most of the teams have played 4 games. Just not a lot to go on. So a team that, when we recorded the first episode, the pilot, so to speak, last week, we were going off one game and really kind of trying to draw conclusions from 40 minutes of basketball, which is pretty difficult. Now, things have swung a little bit. So it's fun. Some of these teams that we were really psyched to talk about in a positive light, after the first weekend have started to show some issues. And then, on the other end, a team that maybe started off quite poorly in game one is now showing reasons to get excited. So I'm excited. Let's dive in.
Let's dive right in. We'll start off positive first, right? So I'll go first with my team that's on the up and coming, stocks that are going big time up. The Dallas Wings, after a rough start against Atlanta in game one, they really bounced back against, and I believe the ESPN Power Rankings came out and ranked the Washington Mystics the number 1 team. That could be a whole nother episode about how I disagree on that. But needless to say, that's a huge win for the Wings. Then they move on to then beat New York with a big win. I mean, this team looked like they had lost their footing early. 2 early wins now. They're sitting at 2-1 in the positive. And you're getting Satu Sabli coming from overseas, where Fenerbahce just won their finals. I believe it was the Turkish finals 3-0. So she's on her way back, which just has to be another shot in the arm for this team. What are your thoughts on the Wings? And then what team are you picking?
I'm super excited about the Wings, and I'm glad we started off with them because that was my stock down team week one. And again, it was kind of unfair. It was just the nature of this exercise. That's what makes it fun. But they lost one game to Atlanta, and it's like, oh, okay, the stock's down. Now it's had a little bit of time to stabilize. So I was lucky enough to be at the game in person yesterday against New York. And I was incredibly impressed. I think there's a lot to be really, really excited about from the Wings' perspective. I think something that I talked about last week that I was concerned about was something that you saw last year in Vicki Johnson's first year as head coach of this team, which was that on a night-to-night basis, you just didn't know what the rotations are going to be. The thing about this Wings roster is that every player on the roster is extremely capable and deserves minutes. And they had a really tough time, I think, last year, even though they returned to the playoffs and in the aggregate, it was a positive season. They had a lot of trouble kind of outlining a starting lineup and outlining a consistent rotation where players kind of knew what they were going to have to do on a night to night basis. And so after game one, when you had Ty Harris, starting at point and then only playing 9 minutes, it kind of looked to me like more of the same. Like, oh man, is this team just gonna kind of be throwing darts at the wall from a rotational standpoint on a night to night basis? And I think what we've seen, with these two wins now, and what Vicky Johnson was talking about in the post game yesterday, is that thank goodness they have 12 capable players, and she's going to need performances from every single one of them. I think what we're seeing is that there's a lot of really, really playable, exciting young talent on this team. You saw Ty Harris with an exceptional game, 10 assists. And then they come off that. She gets injured at the end of that game against Washington. And they come out, yesterday in a game that New York kind of, I'm not going to say desperately needed because it's way too early in the season for must win type of games. But it was a game that New York really wanted to win, their second straight home game after losing to Indiana, afternoon matinee. And Dallas came out and handled business. I was really impressed by their rookie Veronica Burton, who I hope to write about in the future. Just a really solid defensive player, was stepping to Sabrina Ionescu and kind of giving her problems with her ball pressure. Arike had kind of a classic first half where she was struggling to get going and then just started lighting up New York in the second half. Izzy Harrison's just so solid. Kayla Thornton's so solid. They just have a lot of playable players. Marina Mabry hitting step backs. I mean, I could go on and on down the line. Alicia Gray might be the most impressive two-way player on this team. So I just think that there's real reason to be excited given that, one of their main core pieces, as you mentioned, hasn't even arrived yet. Things are on the up and up. I mean, it's way too early to be quoting advanced stats, but they're fifth in net rating right now, outscoring teams by over 4 points per 100 possessions. The top four teams, Chicago, Vegas, Connecticut, Washington, we kind of all expected them to be there. So Dallas, really pleasant surprise so far. I'm impressed.
Move on to your pick.
All right, so stock up over here. I think this was the biggest lock, which is Atlanta, and mostly because what did we expect from Atlanta this year? No one knew. I mean, last year was about as messy and chaotic as it got, both from an on-court standpoint and from a PR standpoint. I think it was just kind of a disaster of a season, and we all knew that the team needed a reset. Okay, great, but how's that actually going to look? Is it still going to look like this team needs a lot of work? How gradual is it going to be? And I think really the only thing to talk about here is the fact that Dan Padover, who was, back-to-back executive of the year in Las Vegas, he comes over to Atlanta, and his first major splash is to trade for the number one overall pick. And the number one overall pick, Ryan Howard, just won Eastern Conference Player of the Week in her first week as a pro. I mean, I need to hit up Curtis, shout out to Across the Timeline, one of the best women's hoop websites, to see if that's ever happened before. I can't remember a rookie winning, player of the week in her first week. Just an exceptional start to the season. Now they're 3-1. This isn't going to continue. I still don't think this is a playoff team. The roster's really thin. Howard is averaging over 20 points a game. No one else is in double figures. They're going to start losing games for sure. But I think that's fine. This team does not have the expectation to be a contender this season. All you want to see is progress, and all you want to see is the number one pick, prove that she was worth the selection and worth the trade that Atlanta made. And I mean, it couldn't be more positive so far. I think that that it's just obvious that this is a player who's a franchise cornerstone. Her ease on the court, the way she, handles the ball, the way she comes off screens, and just scores, without a problem. Man, I'm incredibly impressed.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's been with Ryan Howard. It's looked seamless it's looked like, you know how they always talk about in sports, the game slows down for the vets when you're really in the zone. The game looks slow for her. Her confidence is next level. I gotta say, if there's another play, I mean, I have to assume it would be somebody of the likes of like Candace Parker, Yolanda Griffith, or I'm trying to think of who else would have that stat of pulling Player of the Week in their first week. I mean, Atlanta's a team where their stocks are looking up. You have to be positive, and the only annoying thing for Atlanta fans, it's almost like you want Ryan Howard to do really well. You want this team to grow, but you also don't want to do too good that you ruin your chances for a top draft pick in this coming draft because you have to understand it's not just a one and done season type thing. Like you want to have prolonged success in this league. The honorable mention, I believe we decided, was the Indiana Fever. They've been looking up this season. I mean, first time in easily like 5 years that we can sit here and talk about the positive of the Indiana Fever with a straight face. If they can stay healthy, we've seen amazing growth from their young rookies, and I think it's a team where I want to see more out of. If we're talking stocks, I don't think I'm as big of a buy as where we were on these two other teams we just mentioned, but they are a team that I'm definitely on the positive for. Any quick thoughts on Indiana before we move to our down stock zone?
Yeah, absolutely. Quick thoughts. I totally agree with everything you said. I think that the key point there is just that any positive is so overwhelmingly positive after the past, 4 years of Indiana Fever basketball. So it's like, progress, however marginal it may be, is really really huge. And I think that I also got to see Indiana in New York on Friday night, and again the energy of the team was just so good. I think to hit on so many of these draft picks is really all that you could ask for. Much in the same vein of me saying Atlanta's probably going to lose a lot more games. Indiana's going to lose a lot more games. But you want to see Nalissa Smith and Queen Egbo dominating the boards against a team, with a front court of two max players. That's like real tangible growth. And I think that, if you just, and there's something to be said too for just improved locker room vibes, right? Like, losing over and over, having the longest playoff drought in the league can really wear you down. And to just have this youthful kind of vibrant energy in the locker room and just have these players that the vets are so impressed by and are really kind of refreshed to be playing with, that's just a really great sign for the future of the team. So I think that a really great promising start to the season for the Fever.
And talking about our teams that are not having the most promising start, I'll go first. And probably maybe the only time we're going to see this team on this list. So I kind of had to jump at the opportunity to do it. The Seattle Storm are hobbled on one leg, more metaphorically. I mean, they're missing Stewie, they're missing Prince, they're missing multiple other players. This team is sitting at 1-3. They're at the bottom of the power rankings. They're at the bottom of the standings. Realistically, I don't think we're going to see this team sitting here much longer. We joked about this as, I guess this is like the most 2020 joke we could possibly make, and it's sad, but it's real. Like Brianna Stewart getting COVID, and heck, even Natasha Cloud getting COVID this early in a season where the WNBA players are traveling commercial with no mask mandate on flights. We are going to see a lot more games, a lot more rosters disrupted by health and safety protocol. How positive is it going to be for not only just players on the teams that are expected to make deep runs, but for stars of that team to arguably, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and be a scientist, but from what I understand is they likely are going to have a harder time catching COVID moving forward for what is likely their rest of their season. So might be a good thing for these players. Obviously, we hope everyone stays healthy. We know there's a dark side to it. I'm not trying to make light of the situation, but if everyone stays, relatively healthy, everyone's vaxxed up, whatever, and these players no longer have that worry. Like if, let's say Asia Wilson gets COVID late in the season or
whoever it is, that could have a huge impact on a team in comparison to what it's doing right now for the Storm, where, yeah, they're down, but even we had to debate about whether or not we would put them on the down. What's your thoughts on the Storm?
Yeah, so I this is again where the fun of this exercise comes in, because I think last week it was the Sparks who we kind of disagreed about a little bit, and I think this is going to be the team that I would disagree with a little bit. I really don't. I love the idea of like jumping it, throwing Seattle into the stock down category, because they're not going to be here again. You're not going to have this opportunity. That's kind of where I'm at. I don't see any reason for concern. Their 3 losses are 2 to Phoenix, who's a lock for a playoff team.
Oh, wait a second. Now, wait a second. That's where my part of my thing is like, I don't see if Phoenix, in my mind, I need to see more from them. So I guess like part of it for me is I don't view, as of now, I do not view Phoenix without Brittany Griner a playoff team. So to see Seattle lose even without Stewie, even without these other players, that's what really stung for me. That's just my take. Sorry, go.
No, that's totally fair. I think it's definitely, within question. Personally, I disagree. I think Skylar Diggins-Smith, last year played the best basketball of her career. Obviously, as you saw in the game on Saturday, Diana Taurasi might be a shell of herself in many ways, but she can still kind of put the team on her back offensively and win you a close game. Tina Charles is gonna rack up stats. Diamond DeShields, I'm so happy that she is playing and really looks pretty good. I think was hitting some threes. They've got a lot to figure out, and I think again we have to stress free BG, bring her home. It's been way too long, and I really liked the Wings in their post game after New York yesterday. They made a note to say the same and kind of share that message and share their support of Brittany Griner before getting into any basketball questions. So we got to keep that energy, because it's horrible and really puts such a damper on this season. As far as Seattle is concerned, I mean, the COVID situation is bad. The flights, that is its own podcast. You are going to have teams that are missing key players throughout this season. It's just a byproduct of what's happening in the world right now. I think that as far as Seattle is concerned, maybe my only kind of agreement with you in terms of putting them in the stock down category is that their, maybe lack of depth was exposed with Stewie out. And you saw that against Phoenix, where Jewel Lloyd is a very capable number one. She was hooping, except for that last possession where she turned it over, kind of a little glitch in the matrix, so to speak. But I think that the one question with Seattle, and the one thing that might prohibit them from being in the truly elite tier of contenders this year, rather than that kind of second tier of surefire playoff locks, but can they win the finals? The one thing you'd worry about is that they're a little thin. I mean, Sue Bird is not looking good to start the season, which is incredibly understandable given her age, but it begs the question, should this team, in hindsight is obviously 2020, but this team had a very capable point guard, waiting in the wings in Jordan Canada. They let her walk and are running it back with Sue for one more year. This is a pivotal season. Brianna Stewart's only on the 1-year deal. You need to convince her that this is the place she wants to continue to play basketball at. So if I'm going to talk about stock being down, I think I'd do it from a grander perspective of concern about, re-signing Stewie and just the future of this franchise. I liked a lot of the moves they made this offseason. I love the Brianne January signing, love the Gabby Williams addition. I'm very enthused by what I'm seeing from Ezi Magbagor. She only continues to impress and improve. But they're thin, and when you don't have your best player, you're gonna lose games, and they're really struggling in that regard. So I think stock down for now. We wish Stewie the best. I hope she's recovering well and will be back soon. But that's my take on Seattle currently.
And your stock down team.
Yeah, so my stock down here to wrap us up. I think this is kind of the most obvious, and this was one where last week I was almost clamoring for the New York Liberty to be in the stock up category. You had the Sparks. I said, no, it should be Atlanta or New York. Well, I feel validated about Atlanta, but New York has gone in the complete opposite direction in kind of a shocking way. I think this is like one of maybe the more interesting stories of this first 9 days of the season, 10 days of the season, wherever we're at. Uh, you know, this team just had a really bad stretch of 3 losses. They obviously win the opener against Connecticut at home. Everyone's really excited. Sabrina looks great. Sandy Brondello has injected all kinds of energy into this team, and it seems like they're on the up and up. Benaja Laney hadn't even played yet. There was a lot of reason for excitement. They go to Chicago. They just suffer a rout. I mean, it wasn't close. Score 50 points,
A
just a horrible loss.
shellacking.
A shellacking. I mean, you could go on for days with the adjectives. Shellacking might might just be the one though. That might be the mic drop.
It needs to be used more.
It really does. Such a good word. It was bad. It was really bad. But okay, that's the defending champs. You're on the road. You're still incorporating players into the system. Laney's first game back, whatever. You come home. They've got a 3-game homestand here. Friday night, Indiana. Sunday, Dallas, and then Tuesday, Connecticut again. You're thinking, at worst, you take 2 of these 3 games, and at worst, you take 1. Well, the 2 winnable games of these 3 were Indiana and Dallas. They lost both, and it was just the way they lost these games. They're last in rebounding percentage right now, which might not be surprising. This has been a struggle for years. We've worried about this front court. But they paid Steph Dolson a lot of money. They're paying Natasha Howard the max, and they're still getting killed on the boards. And it's not like, I kind of teased this earlier in the podcast. They got out rebounded by 23, 24 rebounds by the Indiana Fever, who has a front court of rookies playing in their 3rd professional game. It's the way in which they're losing these games that is really concerning. They're getting out hustled. They're getting beat in transition. The transition defense is really sloppy. They're turning the ball over. And I think from a coaching perspective, and again, this is the fickle nature of this exercise, is that there's going to be people who are looking really good one week and are looking questionable the next week. I'm sure I'm going to be heaping praise on Sandy Brondello as the season goes on. But right now, I have some serious questions about her rotations. It seems like, without Rebecca Allen back yet, she hopefully will make her debut tomorrow night against Connecticut. But it really looks like Sandy is grasping for straws here. I mean, I think the prime example of this is Jocelyn Willoughby, who has started every game so far for New York. And in my opinion, has looked really good in terms of what New York is asking her to do. I mean, the first half against Dallas yesterday, Jocelyn had the clamps on Arike. Arike was 1 for 6 from the field. Willoughby was her primary defender, was incredible with the ball denial, just making her work and forcing her into really tough looks, kind of funneling her into the paint and towards the baseline where, Natasha Howard and New York's bigs could then bother Arike's shots at the rim. And Willoughby, for the 2nd straight game, just like in the Indiana game, got completely buried and did not play any of the 4th quarter, did not play any down the stretch. And Brondello was kind of going from player to player, just trying to see if anything stuck. Nothing did. And this one they lost handily. Indiana was an overtime game. They had chances to win that, but really had no business winning that game either. Just a really concerning couple of losses, and I think there's a lot of questions in terms of the roster right now and just who are going to be the rotation players. Not a good start to the season for New York.
Oh, I mean, Hansu has been the lone bright spot realistically, and great to hear that. Great to see that. Honestly, I love the idea of pairing Han with Natasha Howard. I think that would be a scary, fun combo. Both of them can shoot. We saw a little bit of that from Han, but yeah, I think Dolson kind of encapsulates it. Falling out, averaging just 3 rebounds a game in 4 games. Yes, she's shooting 50%. Hasn't hit a 3 yet. It's just been a struggle. This team looks out of sorts. It looks like they're trying to, I don't know. It looks like they're trying to find who they are when you kind of assumed based on what we saw last year this team knew who they were. Yes, they're going to bring in a new coach, work on some culture stuffs, and take that next step forward. It honestly looks like now this team is just an identity crisis, and it's got to be scary, especially after all the hype of a game one win. I'm excited to see what happens on Tuesday with Connecticut and the Liberty. While yes, the Connecticut game is the viewed as the harder game of these three home games that you were talking about, I think you have to look at it at least and say, you know what? Like, if we're going to be a team that, and this is what I always say when you're going up against a top tier team, hey, if you're going to be a contender, you have to find ways to win or at least minimum compete for all 40 minutes against these top tier teams. So I'm excited to see what they can do from that. But yeah, I got to agree. Stocks down. They just have looked like a shell of themselves. No real rhythm, no real flow. And that's really all I got to say about the Liberty. So definitely a stock down. We do have to give an honorable mention to LA, a fall from grace from our last stock check in. But I do want to do a stock watch. Two teams, and we touched on one of them. The Phoenix Mercury are a team that I'm excited to watch for the next couple of weeks and kind of get a gauge of really where they are. The other team that I'm excited for, and probably biasly bringing this up, my hometown team, Minnesota Lynx, with the influx of Avina Westbrook, Mariah Jefferson, Kayla McBride was just activated a few hours ago. They're taking on LA in LA on Tuesday. I'm not necessarily focused on either of these teams' next games specifically, but the next few games to kind of gauge where they are. I think both of them we're going to get a much better sense of who these teams are. Any final thoughts? Anybody you want to do a stock watch for before we turn out for today?
I like this. This is putting me on the spot here with a new segment. This is beautiful. I think as far as the Sparks are concerned, I agree. Definitely reason for concern. I think that the Liz Cambage addition, we're going to have to see how that plays out. Once we get a full season of data. I think the real concern here is that defensively, she kind of takes away from the overall excellence of the team's defense. You can only do so much when your five is just planted in the paint and not really willing to do much else on the defensive end. Or maybe it's not fair to say she's not willing, but she's just not, regardless. So I'd be a little concerned about LA because offensively, obviously, is where the main concerns lie. So if they even regress a little bit on the other end of the ball, the margin for error is just too thin. I think you covered it with Minnesota. I think people were panicking a little too hard after the first handful of games. And I understand it. Like, Cheryl Reeve deserves, she deserves to be questioned for some of her offseason decisions, which were fairly perplexing to the outside eye, but obviously we don't have all the details. I think that they've kind of made up some of that ground with the recent additions you've mentioned. So I think that they'll even out for sure. If I'm going to highlight a stock watch, I think I would have to go. Let me pull up the full list here. I think I'm going to go with Connecticut. It's a team that has only played 2 games, so it's just a team that it's just like major question marks right now. We just don't know. I don't quite understand this early season schedule where they are just not playing. But I think that once we get more data points, more games, and especially once Courtney Williams returns and we're able to kind of see this team at full strength, DeWanna Bonner as well, they just have so much talent, and I'm curious to see how it's going to mesh because 2 games in, Alyssa Thomas looks like prime Alyssa Thomas. She's just, doing what she does so well, which is just basically everything but shooting the basketball. Can this team reach its fullest potential, which is winning the title, if there's this kind of give and take between Alyssa Thomas and Jonquel Jones where it seems like they can't get them both to dominate on the same night? And I think I want to dive deeper into this, which is why I'm just putting it on stock watch. I'm just rambling now. But, 2019, Alyssa Thomas and Jonquel Jones played really well together. They were kind of unstoppable on the floor together. and they took Washington, the greatest offense in league history, to 5 games in the finals before losing. So I think that maybe a little bit of the, can these two coexist narrative is unfair. But I also think there's some truth to it, because just from the eye test, when you watch Alyssa Thomas dominating a game, I often feel like Jonquel Jones is kind of just meandering around the perimeter, not utilized to her fullest potential. And that would worry me. And I just want to see more. So Connecticut stock watch for me.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is I feel like Connecticut, I don't know, Jonquel doesn't look full form, full midseason form yet for me. Whereas, and again, I think part of that might come down to the fact that Jonquel Jones was on a Russian overseas team, and probably had a good amount of downtime before the season started. How much basketball was she playing? How much was she training? Just doesn't look, mid-season MVP Jonquel Jones that we got used to seeing. It'll be interesting to see. I'm excited for that one. This has been WNBA Stocks. We'll be back next time.